Hi everybody. Today I want to talk about unit testing in your Tripal module using the Tripal testing suite. So I want to show you kind of like my workflow and how test suite and how unit testing can make you can be really great. So this is we're going to look at this module Triple CV X-ray. What it does, let's see, hopefully we have, what it does is it provides this neat little tree and it shows you how many entities use that term. So for example, this is the gene ontology and this term reproduction, and I have, say, 93 genes that have been tagged with the term reproduction or one of its children terms. So that's what this module does, is it provides this view. And one of the things it has to do is it has to, it has an index table lookup to make this page fast. So I have a feature request here that I myself have opened on the GitHub project. And you can see I want to know what ontologies have been indexed and what bundles have been indexed, right? So like, has gene been indexed? Has mRNA been indexed? Well, and maybe I'm going to add to this, when was the indexed last run? So these are three features that I want to add to my project. Let's close this, sorry. So what I've done is I open my project, and it's not a huge project, but there's some stuff in there. Hopefully you've watched another video or you followed the instructions and you already have Tripal Test Suite installed and set up. If not, we can direct you there in the comments. So what I'm going to do, here's my console. What I've done here is I just ran vendor bin triple test make test and the name of the test, which is admin X-ray form test, because I didn't have any forms at all, any tests at all for this form. So what that did is it created a test file for me right here. And let's open this up so we can see everything. Right, so it extends the base test case. You generally want to use database transactions. This will prevent your tests from modifying your database. And in general, you want your test, it's kind of like camping. You want to pack it all in and you want to pack it all out. You don't want to make changes to the database because then the next time your test runs and there's already a record there, you might get an error that you didn't get the first time you ran the test, among many other cases where it's problematic. So we can read the docs to learn out more. But you start out with this base test that all it does is it asserts true is true. So it should always be true. And over here, this is my form. This is my code for the form. It's not, let's see, it's about 170 lines of code. It's not so bad. Let's take a look real quick at what this, let's open up my test site and take a look at what this module does. So I'm testing a lot of things, so I'm probably going to have a lot of errors that maybe aren't related to this tutorial, so sorry about that. So I know it's going to be at Tripal extensions, Triple CV X-ray. Okay, so this is the form that results in. It's got some instructions. What you would do is you would select the ontology that you want to index, and then you'd select the content type that you want, and then you click populate. And actually, I'm noticing that this says populate all, and maybe it should say populate selected, right? So I would probably do that right now. This is just because I'm trying to demonstrating how test-driven development works for us, but I also just want to demonstrate, how it works. So I'm going to make a form button ambiguous, and in some of my other projects, I have templates for creating issues and all that to make sure that there's screenshots or warnings or the necessary information. This project is really small. It's just me and a couple of Abdullah and a couple of people have contributed. So I don't need a lot of guidelines or templates, but those can be really helpful. So and also the other thing I like to do is let's include a link. When at the form, located here, the button says, what did the button say? I don't recall. The button said populate all. Populate all, even with nothing selected. What's the expected intended behavior here? And then I'll just say currently ambiguous because I don't want to spend a lot of time writing this up. And then I might just add a label. Let's call it a discussion, or I guess a question. We want to know, So I've just kind of plopped my thoughts out there. We'll come back to it. I'll fix it later. For now, let's get back to what we're doing with the test suite. So we have this form. What I'd like to do is I'd like up here, either maybe above each database or at each bundle, maybe a table that says, lets you know what's been indexed and when it was last indexed. So I will know that I don't need to run interprobe gene again because I haven't added any new genes, for example, since it last ran. So I know what I want, and if you know what you want, or you have some idea what you want, and you're doing test-driven development, you're going to start by writing your test. So so what you'll do is we can just add in the comment above each test, we can add a group. So we'll add group testing. And then we can just run the single group. And look, it's just going to run this one test. It's not going to take a really long time anymore. So, and of course you saw the test passed. We had one test. You can see it says one test with one assertion. So if we go back to our test, we asserted that true is true, so that's no surprise. What do I actually want to test here? So let's make function. We're having a few features. Let's test retrieve index DB. Test retrieve indexed bundles. So each of these, I'm going to have, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to plan it out right now, but this is my two top level functionality, right? I'm going to have some function that looks and sees what databases I'd indexed and maybe when it had been indexed. And then I'm going to have another one that does the same thing for the bundles. So now if I run my test suite, I have two risky tests, two tests that didn't assert anything. So that doesn't surprise me. I got these things. So now how do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Well, I go to my form. And let's see. For now, let's say we're going to add somewhere in the form at the beginning. Or let's make it easy. It's just going to go at the end. Okay. So we're going to say create table of bundle DB index dates. That's all. Okay. And then we will triple CV. We're going to write a function, CV X-ray, retrieve indexed DBs. We'll start with this one. So in the same, normally, maybe this would go in an API, whatever, but for now, it can happily go in this file. I don't think it would need any arguments. I think that's fine. Right? So what is my test going to do? Well, it's going to run this function. It's presumably going to return, let's say, an array of information. It's going to run this. And right here at the start, let's stop. In order for this function to work, it's going to have populated the index with some small amount of data. So if I don't already have this, hopefully I've already written some tests to test the major functionality, but if I haven't, I need to do that. Or I just need, in some way, to insert what I expect. I need to set the database state to some known thing for while I test it. So we would put that here, set db to have known state, retrieve databases. And don't get confused here, this db is a Chatto thing. Chatto.db is a table in my database. So let's spell that out. And then retrieve Chatto databases that have been indexed. And then we would make some assertions, right? We'll say this assert. And start out with something like this. We start out assert that it's not just an empty array. Okay. And then maybe we would this assert has I don't know what we would do actually. What we're going to do, right, is we're going to set something. We're going to pre-populate a certain database. What we would do is we would first set the database with some test data. In this case, it's going to be some test thing to index. I don't think I have this written. I will need to go back and write this because we kind of wrote this module right when we wrote the test suite. But we'll say populate. So we're going to populate test index, and it's going to, some function it's going to be a helper function for the tests only that populates the database, and then we will index it with the test data, and then we'll run our function that's going to return what databases have been indexed, and so maybe populated DB will be an object with some information. Assert equals let's say assert array. Let's do it this way, right? Assert the array has a key. The key we're going to look for is populated DB, and then so what the heck does this mean? This means that first we're going to check that we return an array that's not empty. And then we're going to check that that array actually has the database ID as a key within the array. So what the end result is the key that we're going to look for is the database that we stuck in. So we're going to, not only we're testing that, there's stuff in there, but we're specifically testing that it includes a key of a database that we think should be in there. And as we might come back to this and add some more tests to make sure that it, it's probably going to want, I don't know. I actually don't know what we're going to want. We might need the database name or something like that. So what happens if we run our test right now? We call an undefined function that we actually didn't write yet, so that doesn't surprise me. And then once we write it, we still expect the test to fail because it's going to not pass these assertions. So let's also create, right. And actually, you know, we can make this a private test, private function, populate. It can just be a private function. This populate index. And now what happens if we run the test? Undefined function here, which actually I think is a namespace problem. So this function, right, it didn't find this function. But if we look in our project, we saw that we defined it here in the forms included. So this is actually can be really obnoxious. The reason for this is, so Test Suite, what it does is it bootstraps your entire Drupal site. But often the case is that this file wasn't included in the actual module, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, if we look at Tripal X-Ray module, usually like it's going to load in a bunch of stuff here. Sometimes for forms and that sort of thing, it doesn't need to load it in. Instead, it passes it as an argument in hook menu or something like that, which the Test Suite doesn't have access to. So this probably, you know, we actually really want to add this to the test, but if we require the, where's this form? It's in includes CV collection form, CV collection form. So what happens if we just require the form code, or we run the test? Oh, look. Now we have a different error where test retrieve index database. Let's see. Assert has key. Oh. So we don't even this. It's actually kind of interesting. So on line 32, let's just comment this out for right now. Huh. So what am I doing? I'm doing something that's not very smart here, because you can see I have 3 tests, and one of my tests didn't perform any assertions, but my other test didn't complain at all. Right? It actually likes this. So why is that? Because I don't remember. This is the sort of thing I'll do. Like this other thing. This is the sort of thing. It may seem like I'm like, you know, why haven't I started coding the functionality yet? But the nice thing is that when I start coding the functionality, I will know immediately when I have done, because I can just press this and I'll see that my test passed. So if I write good tests, that's great. So the reason is it indexed is actually the Boolean true. So why the heck would I do that? Where is that? Did I make it return something just by default? Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So let's not return anything. Boom. Failed test. We did not assert that what this thing returned had anything in it. So, and then we can safely do this. I was just messing around. Okay. So let's just assume that I had taken the time to write this previously and it's going to work perfectly. All I need to do is write the functionality to make sure that this function returns and returns some stuff. So in that case, what I would do is, well, now I just need to write this function now. So I know that it's going to, what is it going to do? It's going to query the database. It's going to query specifically this public. This is, you'd have to actually know my module to know why the heck I know this. What is it? I actually have to look it up. It's such a ridiculous name. Tripal CV term entity linker. CV term entity linker. And then I'm just going to call it table. And what it's going to do is it's going to return the list. Okay. So like, really, list equals an empty array. So right now what happens, it should fail, right? I did something not too smart. I don't know why. Yeah, so it still fails. Okay. So I think DB query is my problem. I think I want DB select. Yeah, of course I do. I want DB select. So it's going to query. Query fields. And so honestly, I know that I can chain things by doing it this way, but the problem is that I always forget that you can't chain like a join statement. So I've been burned so many times that now I just write out my query builder like this, redefining the query variable each time. I know it's kind of ridiculous, but it's the way it is. So now I need to start thinking about this is actually going to return. Let's say it's going to return an array of database ID and the name. So what do I actually mean by that? Let's look at this real quick so you all can see what I'm doing. Here's the linker, which unfortunately is empty, I think. So what I've done is I took a little break, and in the break I went ahead and I wrote this populate index function. And I'm going to show you because it didn't take me very long. Kind of wish I'd done it on screen, but what I did is this might not make a lot of sense if you don't use Shadow, but I'm telling Shadow I'm making a fake CV, DB, CV term, DB xref to link the database, or excuse me, to link the CV term and the DB. I make all that fake stuff, and then I make a fake feature, and I see I actually forgot to, and I make a fake feature, and I just artificially insert it into the linker table. So let's make sure this makes some sense, right? This factory, this was what creates a fake Shadow database entry, and if I specify things in this create part, it's going to ensure that the name value is what I set it to here, X-ray test. And so we do that for CV, CV term, DBXref, and in each case, when it has something that has to be linked to the previously created item, I specify it here. And then I create an mRNA, right? I look up the mRNA term up here. Let's put this together so it makes a little more sense. And then I publish the feature, so that creates the entity. I retrieve the entity, make sure that it exists, and then I insert all the things that are going to go in this CV term entity linker table that I just created here, and then I return them. So what I like to do, one of the cool things about unit testing like this is I just can very easily var dump stuff either in the test or even just in the function as I'm writing it. And then I can just run the test. Oops, wrong tab. It's going to be a bit slower now because I run the publishing, which takes a minute, but you can see it actually dumps all the stuff there. So I know that I have what I wanted to have here, which is great. So now, when I run this function, I know that I have entries in that linker database that I want to retrieve. So this should not be empty, but it is still empty. And why is that? It's because I haven't written the actual functionality yet. Right, so what I would normally be doing to test this is I would probably be DPMing stuff. And then I would go to the form, and I would write like refresh the form. And this can get really obnoxious, especially if it's something that happens. I need like certain AJAX situation, you know, I need to have some stuff checked and fill some stuff out and upload a file. It gets really obnoxious. So being able to just supply that in a test and then run it via the command line is so much faster. And then it's also, anyway, that's one really good thing about doing it this way. So what am I doing, right? So now I feel like I've got this table correctly populated. So let's just execute it and see what happens. So query execute. And we're just not really thinking about doing this particularly intelligently. No, we don't want to do this. I'm going to do like results is this, if results. Obviously, again, this is really stupid, but it's something. So, no, I accidentally ran the whole thing that time. So I need to remember to stop there. Okay, good. So what's happening? So I see I have an error in this test. I ran 3 tests, 1 error, 1 risky, 2 assertions. So you know what that means? That means that this test passed. Whoops, which test? This was not empty. Let's comment this out and let's see if we can make it look pretty like it passed. Yeah, isn't that great? So now we can go. So I didn't make it return a key, right? It just returned the results. So you might, let's fire it up index and see what we've got. It retrieved X-ray test, like I would expect it to. So I don't select the database ID because right, I don't have it. So really all I just want to do is make sure that it has, see here's the thing is I just give it the DB. So it's got to be populated DB, oh I see, index DB name. So we're checking that this array, oh man, I did this backwards. Is that right? It's easy to mess this up, I think. Array has key, so key array. So the key is going to be this. Yeah. This is the key we're looking for. The array is indexed. It's actually populated DB. Let's see if this works for us. So we won't dump this. Argument 1, no value, must be an integer or string, and the array has key. So, oops, this was null. Shoot. What does this look like? Database is an object. Oh, it's because it's an array with a DB. So let's do it this way. DB equals populated DB, DB. And then this should work for us. And it did. It did not, I mean to say. The array did not have the key X-ray test. So why did it not have, we did get the name back. I thought we already checked this. Let's look at this indexed array. So it's an array, 0 with an object with the key database. So we'd actually have to loop through indexed and make sure, we're going to have to do something. Let's just do it so that we can see what. So make a DB names array, and then for each indexed as item, and it's going to be database. DB names. I might change this to add more keys or something like that. So what we will do is let's just assign this to a variable. Database is this, and then we'll do it like this. So now I can check that the DB names array has the name. There we go. The test passed. So a couple of small things. One, we can pass stuff here. We can pass a message when it fails. So this would be like the retrieve indexed DB method did not return database test database from the linker index. But this is what's kind of neat. It's now, number one, I know that this function, even though this is a really simple function, if you imagine if this is a much more complex function, if you know what it needs to end up, you know when you're done. When this thing returns, I now know that it has some array that's going to be what I can now expect when in the form. I can build a table with a count or something like that. Number two, I can go back here and this is not a huge function, but if it was a huge function, I could very freely create function Tripal is X-ray. You can very, very easily refactor. And let's say I'm just going to do this. Maybe I'm going to use this query over and over and over. So all we're going to do is refactor this query. So now I get the query from CV, oops, what did I name it? Refactored bit. Okay. Right? So I've refactored this. Maybe I use this a bunch of other places. All I have to do to make sure that I haven't broken my code is rerun the test. And voila, I see that we can remove this from this group so that our test passes and it's clear that we're doing what we intend to be doing. Right, so I just refactored my code base. I just moved this query functionality builder out, and now I could share it with other functions, and I don't have to worry about any bugs I just introduced because I know my test still passes. So if I had good test coverage, I could be really confident in doing things like that. So a couple other things. I could be a little cooler about this. You can open a terminal window in your IDE. So I'm in, let's see here. I could change, custom. This is where I have the PHP Storm project root is where it's going to open by default, which has all my modules. So I need to actually go here. And I can run PHP unit from right within the IDE. I don't tend to like doing that as much just because Oops, and of course I forgot that it's going to run everything. I don't like to do it as much because, well, my path is like huge with my custom add-ons and stuff, but B, for PHP Storm, it's not as intuitive to set up like a watch so that it runs. But you can, for other languages, or even, in this, if you go into the config, you can make it rerun the test every time you save a change to one of these files. So you'll know right away. It'll just keep rerunning your tests. So then the final advantage I wanted to point out is that now I have tests written. So when people try to do they try to publish papers on what's the point of doing unit testing, this is often one of the big ones, that groups that do unit testing are much more likely to have better test coverage of their code if they're writing the tests as they go along. And I honestly, now that I've started doing it, it's become very, very intuitive, very easy, and things that may seem really kind of like a waste of time and intimidating, like creating this function to populate my index. I can reuse this in all of my tests, in the entire everything. And when you get these factory functions are just really handy. So it really does. It becomes pretty easy to quickly create some mock data that you're going to use over and over again. So that's it. I hope this was helpful for some of you. I hope this encourages you to use the test module. Please leave us some feedback. Let us know how we can improve it to make it more useful for you. I hope. Anyway, thanks.